Now I will start with your camera on. Just take away the camera so that you are completely protected with your privacy. So if you can stand up, it's better, and please trust that this has a meaning and we will discover it. So as you stand up, I just would like to invite you to stretch your arms as you inhale towards the ceiling, and exhale and move freely, stretching your sides and finding some space in your back and in your shoulders. And I would just like to invite you to follow the need of your body to create a space of life in your limbs and presence, or a relaxation, and also listen to what's the need of your body now. So don't follow any preconceived or pre-learned pattern of stretching related to sports, to yoga, to anything. Just tune into your body and follow its need to create space, some pleasure, some length. Some breath. And I'm just following the movements that my body needs to do now, without even knowing what I will do, just following an impulse coming from my listening. And sometimes maybe a little self-massage may come in if you feel some tension in particular areas and you want to take your fingers or palm there. And just create moments of self-care, self-connection that make you feel good. And find the way to interweave your breathing in whatever you are doing. So perhaps every gesture accompanies an in-breath or an out-breath. Okay. And for a moment, you can even follow the idea of becoming like a tree. Maybe a tree that you know, or you love, or perhaps you have it in your garden, or it's a dear friend that you go to visit sometimes. So just picture a tree that you love and you know in your mind, and let your body find a way to embody its shape. Or just if you don't have such a relationship in your life with a specific tree, just embody a shape of a tree that is coming to your mind now. Really feeling that your feet, like roots, are pushing into the ground, and your branches, arms are extending, just like the tree would do, towards the sky or laterally, depending on the shape of the tree that you've chosen. And maybe there is still some movement in that tree, maybe just little subtle movements, as if a gentle breeze is just creating some movements in the branches, in the leaves. And as you do so, and you are embodying your tree, you are actually also really breathing the breath of the trees. And all the living organisms in our planet that make up oxygen for us to breathe. And you place a little piece of your attention on this awareness that as you in-breath, you are breathing the out-breath of the trees. And as you out-breath, you are creating carbon dioxide for the trees to breathe and make up their nurturing and the energy that they need for their processes. So in any given moment, we are always in this exchange with breathing between us and all the other living organisms. And anywhere on this planet, we are actually breathing each other all the time. Okay. And when you want, you can find your way to take this experience to a close. And maybe just gently find a way to go back to your seat if you want. Take your time, no hurry. All the time you need to very gently take your body and your system and your awareness back to me and to us and to James. And if you want, when you're ready, you can share a word or two about how you feel now in the chat. Just some keywords about how you feel now, if you want. Inspired, relaxed, more relaxed, rooted, calm, revitalized, grounded, free. More still, reflective, spacious. So this is a practice in many different variations and always happening in the moment that I often use to start my coaching conversations, because as you are telling me in the chat, it really shifts the space, the inner space from where we then can start talking and focusing the agenda for the session with a different presence. Maybe more presence, maybe more listening, and all the beautiful qualities that you are sharing in the chat are, of course, a very nice place to start the conversation from. So on to you, James.
Thanks, Diana. I definitely feel more still after that. Hopefully you're not going to all fall asleep on me now. So one of my specialisms is the relationship between nature and health, and also how we might awaken a greater sense of urgency and action around some of the challenges that we face in the world, and that the planet faces. And so I'm going to talk to you about some of that stuff. I'm going to start with a somewhat provocative statement. What if it was true that there was no good life without nature connection? There's a lot of evidence to support that statement. We've known, haven't we, for a very long time that nature is good for us. It's essential for our health and well-being. We knew that before the emergence of modern science, before the emergence of Western thought. We could think about, around the world, we could think about some festivals and some cultures that have developed around an appreciation for nature, the natural world, harvest. We've got things like Pongal, the Tamil harvest festival. It's about 2,000 years old. We've got Hanami, which is in the picture here, the appreciation of blossom and cherry blossom in particular, which started around 700 years CE. And I was writing recently about May Day, which comes from the medieval Celtic festival of Beltane, and one of those 4 major seasonal celebrations that are a big part of the cultural history in this country, at least, and Ireland and Scotland. But actually, the pathway to nature connection is really through something of a felt sense. So I'm going to offer you a bit of that felt sense now, just for a couple of minutes. I'm going to play this short video. I'd invite you to put headphones on if you have them, or turn your sound up. And you're going to hear some things, and you may feel some things as you just take another moment to be still and experience some nature connection. Just bringing you out of that rather rudely there. Something that's available to us at any time if we stepped outside, or even, a poor cousin of it in that virtual way, are a set of ingredients of the natural world that do some quite profound things to us as a human species. There are the fractals, those patterns in those trees and those branches that you could see in that video, which have been shown to relax us. And, clearly there's an immediate relaxation that happens when we look at a scene like that. Natural sounds, a big area of research, also shown to relax us. Sunlight has some really profound impacts. It obviously creates vitamin D, which is essential for bone health, but it also just lifts our mood and helps us feel less tired. Plant chemicals, a big part of the forest bathing research canon. So these chemicals given off by leaves, trees like Japanese cypress, for example, have been shown to reduce blood pressure, lower the levels of stress hormones like cortisol in our blood, and even activate parts of our immune system that might even fight cancers. And if we get our hands dirty, which we can't do in a video, but if we go outside into a garden or a park, our world is full of harmless soil bacteria that actually lower stress as well and help our bodies fight inflammation as part of a healthy gut microbiome. So there are a bunch of things, ingredients in the natural world which come to us, which perhaps we take for granted and act on us maybe sometimes unconsciously. There's also some interesting things that happen, especially around this issue of stress. Such a hot topic at the moment in the world that we live in, through the pandemic, post-pandemic. Stress is becoming, unfortunately, an even bigger part of our lives. And one of the things that happens when we're very stressed, when we're activating our fight or flight response, you will know about that, I'm sure, is that our actual field of vision narrows down. It actually narrows from about a 55-degree cone of visual attention down as small as half a degree. And that's for good reasons. We want to be able to really focus on that predator, or in this case, a sparrow, and make sure that we know what we're doing in response. We're going to try and fight it, we're going to run away, we're going to try and hide, perhaps. And our bodies are flooded with adrenaline and cortisol. But what happens in stress is that response can become chronic, and can become a way in which we focus on the world, not just through the visual cortex, but also our mind's eye. When we're in stress and in fight or flight, our attention focuses away from, for example, other people, the relationships we might be having around us, our communities, and the natural world. And when we step out into nature, not only does our cone of visual attention relax, but actually our mind's eye can relax too, helping us take a broader view of the world. And there's something really profoundly important about that. Studies in California, for example, have shown that when they take people into groves of really tall trees, and they conduct experiments, one of those experiments is dropping, the researchers accidentally drop some pens in front of the research subjects, and they count how many pens do people pick up. And then they compare the tall trees with a city environment with tall buildings, and they see, where are people being more generous? And it's in those environments with the tall trees. And this is about activating a sense of awe. Awe is about something bigger, larger, more mysterious, and perhaps more important than yourself. And that reduced sense of self actually becoming an empowering one in which we're more drawn to build trust with other people. We're more likely to be kind. Some recent research with older people in this country has shown that actually when experiencing awe in nature, they're friendlier, they smile more to others, they feel less lonely, which is a really important thing for people when they become of a certain age. And other studies have shown that people make more ethical decisions. So if you imagine the executives in the banks and in big oil and in big pharma, if those people are stressed, they're more likely to be making narrowly focused decisions for the benefit of themselves and less likely to be taking a broader view of the world around them, so that decisions are based in a more grounded sense of ethics. And that, as I've come to explain, the challenges facing us, you know them as well as I do, is incredibly important if we want the world to be a better one. And there are other things that we benefit from when we connect with nature. Lots and lots of excellent research on feeling calmer, lowering anxiety, a sense of improved happiness. A survey in England in last summer showed 83% of people felt happier when they were in nature. And happiness, we know, is an enormous predictor for life success, satisfaction, health, longevity. There is an ability to boost creativity by working in nature. There were some really good experiments in Denmark. They took creatives outdoors, and they took people indoors, and they did some creative stuff. And they found that in those early stages of the creative process, the incubation process, the chucking ideas about part of the creative process, they were more successful, they were more productive, they were more creative when they were doing that work outside than they were inside in the art room or the studio. And there's evidence that views of nature and time in nature actually increases productivity, validating some of the old theories that you might have heard around attention restoration, the ability for nature to restore our attention, calm our minds down so we can deliver a task more productively. This is a picture of a green roof my business partner has created, and views of green roofs or other greenery outside office windows can deliver some of the benefits that I'm just talking about here. So lots of reasons to be cheerful and positive and optimistic. But it wouldn't be, a real story here if I wasn't going to tell you about some of the realities of what we're facing too. I don't know if you can quite read this, but this is from a Twitter post recently by a channel that I follow called Shit Lawns, excuse my French. This is somebody complaining about their plastic lawn that they've installed, that it's developed bumps. And they don't know what those bumps are, and they wish those bumps could go away. And those bumps are moles trying to get up onto the surface as part of their tunneling activity. There's something incredibly sad about that we think that we can iron over nature just for our convenience. And there's a hard truth, especially for those on the call from the UK, that although we think of ourselves as a nature of gardeners, a nature of people with great connections to nature, the truth is the opposite. This graph shows the well-being. So it's an average well-being score against a nature connectedness score. And the UK is right down here, just slightly better than Hong Kong. If anyone on the call is from Portugal or Spain or Bulgaria or Italy even, far more nature connected societies and a stronger relationship between nature and well-being. Even the pandemic, which saw an upswing in nature connection, started to decline again. A 25% drop in nature connectedness in England between April 2020 and April 2021, for example. 83% of British children can't recognize a bumblebee, and 30% of adults in this country who've not spent any time outdoors in the last 2 weeks. And the impacts are not equal. So no good life without nature was my opening statement. There are big sections of our communities that simply don't have a local access to nature. Impacts are grossly unequal, and there are big issues of environmental justice here. So if you're from a Black, Asian, or minority ethnic background, you're twice as likely to live in an area which has no local green space, 4 times less likely to have a garden, more likely to suffer from other environmental injustices such as poor air quality. And there is a relationship between green space and longevity, which is estimated that a 10% reduction in local green space is equivalent to about 5 years of life expectancy. So this stuff is literally life and death. And we know that the natural world is having a hard time. Everyone can recognize this little creature, I'm sure. 70 years ago, there were 36 million hedgehogs in the UK. Now there is 1 million. The risk of human exposure to zoonoses and lethal pandemics increases as we disrupt our ecosystems. We've got something like nearly a third of Americans who say they're not worried about global warming. They won't be the only nation. I'm not picking on America. It'll be the same elsewhere. But I'm going to go back to some of the good news. Give us a sense of empowerment. We do have agency. It isn't too late. These numbers relate to 3 statements. So there's a report that came out recently from the Institute of Climate Change and Human Behavior. There's estimated to be 30 behavioral changes, so things that you and I can do that will mitigate up to 36% of the global emissions that we need to reduce over the next 30 years. So there are things that we can do, you, me, our friends, our neighbours, that can make a difference. That's not a substitute for institutional and political systemic change, but is a massive contribution as to the climate change and the nature challenge. And a big chunk of the actions that are required to mitigate and adapt to climate change are ones which are nature-based. So what does this all mean for nature connection? What is nature connection? Well, nature connection is defined by Mayer in France in 2004, and they said it was an experiential sense of belonging. So keywords in there, right? So it's about our senses and what we feel. It's about actually experiencing that, having a real encounter in a way which shifts and changes those senses. and results in feeling oneness or belonging with the more than human world, the natural world around us. And there's been some really interesting and I think quite exciting and empowering research recently, which has said, well, what is it that we could do then to develop that experiential sense of belonging and release some of the benefits that I've talked about in the previous slides? And there's considered to be 5 pathways that we can follow to deepen our sense of nature connection. So the first is contact, and that's about getting outside and reflecting on how our senses are changing in response to the natural world, in response to the birds that we could hear in that video, the trees moving, the sunlight coming through, the breeze, the smell if we were out there in the real world of the soil, of the earth, of the plants warming up around us. What does this mean to us is the second pathway. So the sense of trying to make meaning from it is incredibly important and absolutely what coaching is about, right? Enabling us as meaning-making machines to find a sense of meaning in what we encounter. To engage with our emotions, to notice beauty is a particularly strong driver in human health and well-being, is engagement with aesthetics and nature, natural aesthetics being even stronger drivers of health and well-being than other forms of art and craft. And then finally, compassion. How could we give back to the natural world? How do we shift this from ego to eco? A lot of what Diana and I see and encounter, I think, in the world of coaching is in the ego space. Nature coaching is so much more than just coaching and how you would already do it, but outside. And what we've shown in the science of nature connection is that people who are more nature connected take twice as much pro-environmental behavior in their daily lives and almost twice as much pro-nature conservation behavior. I talked about those chunk of behavioral actions that make a difference to climate and nature recovery. So we activate nature connection, we get the benefits for ourselves, but we're more likely to give back to the natural world. And this was put very eloquently by a number of people, not least Stephen Jay Gould, who wrote in 1993, "We cannot win this battle to save species and environments without forging an emotional bond between ourselves and nature as well. For we will not fight to save what we do not love." And now I'm going to hand over to Diana. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, James. It's always so lovely to hear all these concepts. Now it's so many webinars we do together, but every time I really feel the need to listen to these words, to these concepts, because it's both enlightening for me about my relationship with nature and what else is emerging in me through that not only has to do with my personal well-being and what I personally get from these from nurturing a dialogue with nature and my connection with nature, but it also leads the way to being more engaged with nature as with respecting her more, and also making me want to do everything I can to protect her and also spread the word about this data, this research, and we desperately need this. And so, yeah, this for me is really like my end goal as a nature coach, is really to reconnect people with this longing to take care of our planet and the life all around us, and not just our life. So for me, for this purpose, learning how to take coaching sessions outdoors in the dialogue with nature is really a piece of what needs to be done, and what, if you are a coach, you are, in my opinion, called to start doing to empower your practice and also to lead to all these beautiful benefits that James has just addressed so thoroughly. And I would like to start by sharing a slide. Just a second for me to recall it, with a quote from Joanna Macy. Joanna Macy is a very famous American ecologist and the author of the creator of the work that reconnects. And she says, the global crisis is, in essence, a crisis of perception. There can be no technological fix, but only a revolution in the way we perceive ourselves and our relationship with the earth. And this leads to another concept that I love, that I've taken from my training with Otto Scharmer from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, when he says we need to shift the inner space from which we operate. This is his definition of leadership. Leadership is really shifting this space, opening ourselves to different perspectives. And in a recent article, Arianna Huffington, this is the title of a recent article by Arianna Huffington, where she collects some data and articles and reflections from her own experience. And she says the people that are having a dramatic impact as decision makers on the health of our planet, and therefore on the health and lives of all living beings on the planet, are probably the most stressed out people. And so when we are in a state of stress and burnout, we are actually in our worst conditions to do the best decisions that we need to take to give ourselves a chance to survive this climate crisis. And not only for ourselves as a species, but also for all the other non-human living beings that share with us our planet. And when I share this slide, as I work a lot with executives and top managers, and most of the time I am called to do leadership programs for sustainability, and I ask them, do you feel that you now are in your best conditions possible to take brave, courageous, long-term looking decisions? And the answer is most of the times no, for most of the people that I engage with in these workshops. So the rise in stress, burnout, and depression rates over the past 2 years have made us even worse when it comes to taking the good decisions that we need to support the living forces of ourselves and our planet. So what James was talking about is really how nature can help us connect with this sense of ecophilia. So the feeling of affiliation and love for nature. And this is what I witness when I do coaching outdoors, and which is something that I witness in every session, that when we include nature as a subject, and now I will tell you, of course, more about this, when we include nature as a co-partner in the coaching dialogue, the potential that is awakened in the coachee is much higher than when we coach indoors in a building in concrete walls, among concrete walls with artificial lights. So a different potential emerges, which has to do with how nature relates with us. And for this, before going on, I would like to invite you to create another moment of centering inside yourself. So maybe just if you want to take away your eyes from the screen and just create a space of self-connection for a moment, and take your attention to your breath now and how it feels, the breathing and the air coming in and out of your body now. And maybe you can look around you. So if you had your eyes closed, just gently open them and look around you and see if you have a little aspect of, or big aspect of nature nearby you. It can be a tree outside of the window or inside your room, or just the sky out of the window, or just the feeling of being on the planet, on the ground somehow, even if you're not at ground level. So, or it may even be an animal that you have in your house. So take your attention physically also connecting with this natural aspect close to where you are. And just look at it, whatever it is. So in this moment, I'm just looking at the sky. Now I'm shifting my attention to this beautiful tree outside of my window. And as you look at it, you are watching it, and notice that you are also being watched by the natural subject that you're connecting with. And yes, you are feeling it with your eyes, and maybe also throughout your body, there is a sensation emerging. Maybe the natural subject that you're watching is somehow connecting with you more with your eyes or in the heart, or maybe it creates a feeling in your belly or in your feet or in your hands. Just notice if there is an embodied response to the subject, natural subject that you are connecting with. And yes, you are feeling it, but it is also feeling you and looking back at you. And sometimes when I do this with my clients in nature, outdoors, and I invite my clients to connect with, for example, a tree, then the next question is, what is this natural being seeing of you? How is it perceiving you? How would it describe what is it's seeing of you and witnessing of you? And so maybe you can work this through on your own. Now we don't have much time left for this session, so I just wanted to give you a brief idea of how else we can connect with nature rather than just be there, and really give nature back its subjectivity, because nature is always feeling us, especially the trees, but all living beings. They have senses that are much more developed so far, I think, than us. In most cases, maybe not in general. So, so let's see some what's behind these practices that I've just proposed you, just like the initial embodied centering practice. And let me share with you a different set of slides. Okay. So embodiment is, in Amanda Blake's definition, a sensory, perceptive, felt way of knowing oneself, others, and the world.
Diana.
So yes.
We're in speaker view.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yeah, probably I needed to share a different screen. Yes, thank you. Thanks a lot. Yes, please tell me if there's something wrong.
Yeah, that's speaker view.
Still speaker view?
Yeah.
What's happening? Let me see. Yes, I was sharing the wrong desktop. I'm sorry. Okay. So embodiment is really about being a body instead of having a body. It's about retrieving this vivid sense of belonging, relationality, interconnection with other living subjects, human and non-human. And it's about emptying of thoughts, or at least discharging and modulating the mental saturation that is what Arianna Huffington was meaning when we are so stressed and so filled with thinking that we forget the rest, the biggest source of our perceptions, which is our body. And the body is actually, I love to call it a great organ of sense, because we feel and we make sense of lives around us and what happens to us and everything around us through our body. So we have just listened from James all the benefits of nature connection, and we could quote analogous benefits for embodiment practices, which is how can we repair the fundamental disconnection between our sense of I, of selves, and our body. And personally, my experience is that the disconnection that we are ending up having as a collective, as a human species, the radical disconnection from our species to the rest of the natural world is rooted in the basic foundational disconnection between us and our bodies. So this, for me, this recalling our somatic intelligence, reconnecting with our bodies, means reconnecting with nature inside of us and outside of us, out there. And one more piece. Oops, sharing the wrong screen. There we go. Okay. And one more piece is I'm selecting, because I would share so many things, but then it would be too much. So when it comes to nature coaching, this is my definition. So it's an approach to coaching developed in connection with nature and not simply in the presence of nature, with nature as co-coach. And I'm coming to this definition in a moment. So the nature coach integrates in the session practices that open the state of perception and awareness of the client, allowing the coachee to develop a felt sense of ecosystemic connection, in which a state of full presence and exchange between our somatic intelligence and the intelligence of the natural world is cultivated. So in these states of perception that often require, in my experience, some embodiment practices like the one that I did in the opening, but even more articulated, and usually I invent them in the moment based on the specific exchange that is happening between me, the client, and nature in that moment, in that place. Every practice is always, is most of the time unique and specific and in the moment. And that kind of practice really leads to a different quality in the dialogue that then can emerge during a coaching session. And I will share a framework that I presented at Converge with James Farrell. Converge is the biannual Congress of the International Coaching Federation. Just recalling now the slide, voila. And we have presented these in maybe October, as far as I remember. So the idea is that starting from you as a person to cultivate your personal nature-connected practices, because you can only give what you have, and how can you support your clients in benefiting from all the things that James just shared if you don't have it in your own as an experience, as a practice. So we start with ourselves, as always, by reconnecting with nature and defining our nature connectedness cultivation routines. So once you are familiar with working with nature, with downloading ideas, inspiration, and insights, accessing wider states of awareness through contemplative practices and meditation, or practices that really allow you to move from here to here. I always love to say to take your body into your mind and your mind into your body, recreating this connection, this interconnection, or even nesting your mind into your body, or vice versa. So just to recreate this bridge. So once you have touched and experienced yourself, this possibility that nature talks to you, then this is my experience, at least. This is what I've been practicing since maybe 30 years now. And at a certain point in my life, it was 2009, I felt the need to start sharing with others these kind of practices that were so healing for me and powerful, and made me really feel like nature was not only there as a background or as a container of fantastic human experiences, but was there to talk to us and is there to talk to us. And I think even this is my imagination, but really also wants to help us come out of this mess of the climate emergency. So if we only allow ourselves to widen our state of perception, we then can start receiving ideas, inspiration, and insights from nature. And this personally is my work as a coach, to enable my clients to have this dialogue. So here there are like different layers in your in the potential of working with nature. In the first layer, we have nature as a background. So this is like the starting piece. Just take your conversation outdoors and see what changes in you as a coach as you converse with your client, and also for the client, and ask the client at the end of the session, how's it going? How is this session different from the others that we had online or indoors? So this way you can start tasting and having an idea of the impact that nature can have on the client. And usually the feedbacks that I get is that people felt more creative or present or reflective or centered, aligned. Just gather your own feedback and see how it goes. Then another thing that I hear a lot doing from also so many colleagues now, exploring and experimenting at the edge between coaching as usual and nature coaching, is that nature can also provide lots of contents to articulate inner states of feeling, perception, how you perceive your topic, the challenge you're working on with your coach. So the subject, so I prefer to call it natural subjects rather than natural objects, because I really want to de-objectify nature, because it's something really dangerous that we should really stop doing now. So when you see a certain landscape, how that landscape relates to what you're talking about, when you connect with a certain natural being that is attracting your attention and curiosity during a session, how he or she relating to your topic, the different objects that offer inspiration to talk about a problem or a solution. And so also all the creative work that can be done with these natural subjects that you can find in a natural environment. Then there is the symbology of these natural subjects and the biomimicry approach, which looks at nature as a source of genius, basically, that we can apply, a source of principles, ideas, and strategies that we can apply. So how can you learn more about the ethology, for example, or the behavior or a specific animal that you meet perhaps during a session, or a certain tree that your client felt connected to during the conversation and just wanted to connect more, even with an embodied practice maybe, or just a contemplation practice. So all these aspects of the research that you can do on the symbology of natural aspects that found their way in the coaching session somehow, or the specific learnings that you can get from these natural subjects that have been part of the conversation. These pieces of research can be somehow also an homework that clients can do between sessions to go deeper into the meanings that people can get through nature connection practices during the session. And then, there is the last piece, which is what I was talking to you before. So when we engage fully with our senses, with nature, and we allow our state of awareness and perception to shift from an ordinarily cognitive beta state, which is usually linked to verbal communication, to pre-verbal, non-verbal communication. And with some curiosity, I acknowledge that most of the things that we come to know about ourselves, others, and life is formed in an age in our human development where we don't speak. Isn't that funny? Most of the things that impact the way we then understand ourselves and the world are learned in the pre-verbal stage of our evolutionary process when we are an infant, okay, when we don't speak yet. So for me, accessing the potential of nature to talk to us requires to move beyond the verbal communication between coach and client, where we really, and this is a beautiful picture from James, where when we really enter a different state of perception where nature can actually talk to us. And amazingly, I found this scientific researcher, which is Monica Gagliano, and this is one of the books that I really suggest that you read. This is a scientific researcher who is really changing the way we think of plants, and he's at the forefront of research on plant intelligence. This book is called Does Spoke the Plant? And in this book, you can really read about the process through which she listens to the plants, and the plants tell her which kind of scientific research is to do. Okay, you should research this and that with this kind of protocol. And sometimes she doesn't understand what the plant is saying. And the plant says, trust me, don't worry, I will give you more information over the next time. And this is a published researcher on some of the most famous scientific research magazines. And she teaches at the University of Australia. So it may seem odd or strange, but actually this is a competence that we have always had before the so-called scientific thinking in a certain way took charge of the way we understand how the world works and our self-work. So just like to share one last brief reflection on this. And there we go. Yes, so I like to call this the theory of the pine cone. And the pine cone is a very ancient symbol that we find since, hopefully you are not seeing the screens, the presenter screen. We are seeing it correctly?
No, we're seeing the presenter screen.
Okay. There we go. Okay. So in these pictures, you see very ancient representations of the pine cone, which we find even in the Catholic iconography, or this is the famous caduceus, and these are very famous statues in Italy. So we find these representations of the pine in many different traditions in the Western European world as well. And this is an ancient sculpture coming from the Greek Dionysus rites and mythology. So the theory of the pine cone for me is really reconnecting with this ancient heritage that we share. Now, the pine cone is a symbol that is very much rooted in our European heritage, but we find that the concept of expanded states of awareness in all indigenous cultures. And actually, this is the way that humans have always gathered knowing, so directly from the dialogue with nature. So taking this tradition, this heritage, this lineage, from our ancient roots to the coaching session for us today in the so-called contemporary world. I would like you to give you some insights about what it means for me to be a nature coach. It means to be a facilitator of deep nature connection for the coachee so that he can access nature's intelligence directly, like our ancestors have always done. A nature coach is familiar with embodied and contemplative practices in synergy with nature so that we can get all the benefits that James was sharing and also all the benefits from reconnecting with our bodies. Knows how to work with silence, embodiment. Sometimes my sessions are eyes closed, me and the coachee, to enter this deeper in self-attunement, which eyes closed just don't allow, because our brain works more creatively and insights emerge more easily when we close our eyes. And facilitates reciprocity with nature. So what I was just practicing with you a few minutes ago, this sense of feeling and being felt, watching and being watched. And what is nature seeing of me? Sometimes this can be really enlightening when it comes to the to looking at the coach's topics and challenges, and can really lead to a shift in the perspective of the client on himself or herself. So these are just some of the slides that I would like to share, and time is running out, and we would also like to come to you and have your perspectives on these ideas and doubts and questions. But before this, I would like to ask you to just self-tune for a moment and feel what's emerging in your awareness after this conversation with me and James. And perhaps find some keywords, and I will now share a link in the chat where you can go and share some of the keywords. So if you go to the link in the chat, or you have a cell phone nearby and can take a photo with this of this QR code, you get immediately to this poll, and you can add keywords which express what you are, what's your insight or your takeaway from this part of conversation. You can add even more than just one keyword, just add response after sending each one. And if you want, you can share the keyword here and also some comments in the chat along with your questions. And and James, anything you would like to add at this point?
So thanks, Diana. Yes, so do put in your thoughts and feelings. What are you reflecting on now? What is it that you might take away? And if not in the Slido, then in the chat. It would be great to hear any final reflections or thoughts about today's session. Diana and I are always looking for ways to improve for the future, so it was always good to have your feedback. I'll just let those words develop for a minute, I think, Diana, and then we can open up for questions. And we're going to finish just by 6:20, just with a slide to show how you can connect with Diana and myself, and some offerings that we have to you from us. So nice, lots and lots and lots of connection, and perhaps unsurprisingly. I think it's interesting how we, there's a sense of us connecting to each other on this call even. We haven't had the chance to talk in small groups, but I certainly have a feeling of connection to some extent with everyone who's turned up today, which is a gift, because I didn't have that beforehand.
Yeah, I would also like to just a little bit of even more body to what I shared about the possibility of doing coaching with nature, by just sharing some photos from the sessions that my students at the Nature Coaching Academy do. How would it be to have your clients experience something like this during the session? How would it be to do a coaching session like this, to work with your clients like this? So these are some photos from one of the last workshops, but just to give you an example that yes, we can do it. It's possible, it's enriching, it's distressing, it's really, it creates an opening between the coach and the client, and among them and nature. So this is a typical walk and talk session. And I would really like to encourage you to really start exploring this and see what's the benefit also for you as a coach and for your clients. And if you will start doing it, then we obviously want to know how it's going. And please share your feedback and insights and your discoveries with us via email if you want.
Thanks for sharing those lovely photos. So do you have some questions? Who would like to ask a question? We usually have a Zoom hand thing, but don't feel obliged to use that. If you just want to talk, then talk.
Yes, also share doubts or questions, practical questions. How do you do this? What's the contract? I don't know. Whatever comes in your mind that may be inspiring for you and for others, or clarifying, or just unmute yourself and
they're shy. Give them a minute.
Do you rely on the coachee to choose the natural space? This is a great question. James, can I say something? Then you can add your experience. Yeah, it really depends on the client. Most of the times so far, the vast majority of my sessions outdoors have been in places where I have a strong connection with. So I just invited the client, because for me, the most important piece is that the coach needs to feel comfortable in the space where we are, because we are the container of the conversation, the experience, whatever. So personally, most of the times I just propose, most of the time the client doesn't even have a preferred natural space. So sometimes it's happened that the client had this favorite place, And sometimes, very rarely, but it happened, I didn't know that place and I didn't have the chance to do an on-site inspection beforehand. So I feel very comfortable in working with not knowing, and so it was not a problem for me. But usually if I don't know the place, it's preferable that we do an on-site inspection beforehand, before the session. Otherwise, most of the time I decide the place, and then so it's also nicer because then the client really is allowed to work even more with his or her intuition about where to go, because he or she is free from pre-learning about that space. So it's even more interesting. James, if you want to add something for you.
Yeah, I'll add to that, and I'll pick up a couple of other questions in the chat from Colin and Santi as well. Most of my nature coaching, 80–90% of it is virtual. So that means because of the way I operate up nationally, then it's not practical for me to get face to face with clients. So it can be beautiful and still extremely powerful. Most of the time, the way that happens is that I will be in a nearby space in nature that works for me, that's near home, that's accessible and safe and all the rest of it. And the same for my client. And we have headphones and we do the coaching essentially like that. What is really important for me, and I think for professional practice, is to contract very carefully before you begin any form of nature coaching. There are, I work often with clients that live in cities and towns. There are issues around safety, physical safety. There are issues around people's ability to show emotion, to open up if they feel they're being watched, if they're near others, if they're being overheard. So all of that, I think, needs careful contracting. And I do have clients for whom they would rather just be inside, and that's fine. So I think it needs care. And I think with the right care, you'll have the best experience. So yes, Colin, absolutely virtual, totally possible, really, really useful. And then Santi and Pao asked a question about what techniques work for getting people to connect with themselves before they connect with nature. And I'd suggest a different frame for that. I'd suggest that by connecting with nature, you're also connecting with yourself. I think we have started to lose our natural, perhaps, affinity and ability to connect with nature. We live our lives on phones, on screens. We go for a walk, we've still got our phone, we're texting as we walk along, we're rushing to the next appointment, we're squeezing in a dog walk, whatever. And I think it's as simple as turning that phone off or leaving it at home and just sitting somewhere and just noticing. It's as simple and as powerful often as that. At the end, I'm going to give you a link to my book, which I've published, which has a set of 20 practices that you can take out with you, pocket-sized, that give you ideas for different things you can do. But in the end, it's as simple, I think, as sitting in a favorite space somewhere outside with no distractions and just noticing what happens in yourself and in the world around you.
Yeah, so I think you have also addressed this question by Colin. Is it possible to do a virtual nature coaching session? So yes. And also, I would say that when I do online coaching, and I would say, unfortunately, I do some, maybe I should say I do a lot, but I work a lot somatically. So we are nature, and so whenever we work throughout our bodies, that's the easiest way to reconnect with my most natural aspect of my identity. So and also, as you've probably experienced a little bit with my second practice, or the first one, yes, you can work with natural metaphors and natural subjects, even inside your house or just outdoors. So even, I'm Italian, I live in Italy. When it's winter, Italians don't just love to go outside. So we are very different from the northern part of Europe, we just prefer to stay indoors. So of course, working through the body and with the nature that is accessible indoors is another great option. And it's, in my experience, not as powerful as actually being out there. Personally, my experience. But it's the best that we can do in those conditions. So
a question here from Laura. I wonder if Laura, can you say a little bit more, if you don't mind coming off a mute, say a little bit more about that question of yours about symbolism?
Yeah, so Laura is asking, are there some resources to go deep on the symbolic world that concern nature in relation to human development? Not sure I understand the question really. If Laura, can you clarify exactly? Not sure I understand that really. And also Elena is asking, natural world could also be hostile. For example, earthquakes, thunder and lightning. How do you handle the moments when both humans and animals are afraid and scared? Oh gosh, luckily I haven't had a coaching session during an earthquake, honestly. So I don't really know how to reply to this. And when the weather forecast is set on thunders or weather condition that may prevent safety, it honestly, so far, it's happened just once in my experience, but then we just canceled the outdoor session and we substituted it with an indoor session. So of course, I don't expose my clients to any kind of danger or insecurity. And to recall what James was saying about the contracting phase, this is crucial. So usually when I first introduce myself to a client, I tell him or her which kind of approach I have to coaching, which kind of practices I find very useful during a coaching session. And my approach basically is embodied and nature connected. If the clients in that initial touch point likes that, usually then throughout the coaching journey and the coaching process, we may decide to take the sessions outdoors from the start if the client wants, or later in the journey. So not necessarily all outdoors or all indoors, but a mix is, in my experience, what I have done the most. So most frequently, either I am called because potential clients know that I am a somatic and nature connected coach. So they ask that we do coaching sessions outdoors from the start. And this is some parts of my clients come from this way, from my website or word of mouth and so on. But the other piece is that I get called directly from companies for my profession as an executive coach. And so when I am called to work as a coach in this kind of context, the contracting phase is even more important because clients may not even suspect that conversations may be taken outdoors. So it's a very delicate part of the contract, but we would need to go into much deeper details. And so this is just an informational webinar, and you will to follow us more.
So we said we'd finish at 20 past, which is now. I'm just going to share one last slide just with some resources on it, if I can do that. So just 3 things to point your attention to. I mentioned my book, so you can buy it in Amazon and all of those other bookshops, but if you would like to order it direct from my publisher, then you can get a discount, 10% discount if you quote Nature Connect 10 when you check out. So it's available as a paperback, it's pocket-sized, an EPUB, and if you go to Amazon, as a Kindle book as well. So hopefully that's something that you would enjoy. David Attenborough has a copy on his bookshelf, so why not get one as well? On the right there is a link to a TEDx talk by Diana and myself last September called Let Nature Be Your Coach. So if you go to TEDx or TED online or to YouTube, you can easily find that, and it covers a lot of what we've talked about today, actually. So I think you might
Take that first, and then I'll give you blueberries.
Hi, somebody's off mute. And then finally, Diana was also would like to say something, I think, about her nature coaching and forest coaching workshops and training. Diana.
Yes, so I will share once more these.
Let me leave this up. Oh.
Sorry?
It's okay.
Yeah, so yeah, basically also to respond to another question, what I teach at the Nature Coaching Academy is this 8 natural archetypes model. And so a person was asking, how do we work with the waters as an archetype for personal growth? Basically, we have an approach to working in synergy with nature through coaching and nature connection based on this model that I created. And it's the subject of our courses at the Nature Coaching Academy. And the next workshops that I would really like to invite you, oh, wait, sorry for the confusion. Yeah, it's okay, is so we have an upcoming workshop in the Amazon rainforest, thanks to Paulina and Santiago, which are my Ecuador representatives, and so I will place this link in the chat, and it's in October. And we also have a nature coaching immersion of 5 days in Italy at the end of June. And you can write me for further information. And here's the link to get the information about the Ecuador retreat. You'll find it in the chat, just in case you want to join. It's going to be a beautiful experience in synergy with the greatest residual forest in the world. And we're going to have great adventures and learning there. So I think that's all for now. If we have no more questions. Voila, and here are all our data and information.
So please do give us an email. We will, if you've opted in via the Eventbrite or Zoom link, we will email you a number of things, including a pretty exhaustive list of the research that I quoted and Diana quoted, plus some more for those of you that like to dive deeper into the research. So you'll get that, plus links to podcasts that we've done, conference speeches, TEDx, book, and so on, courses. Thank you very much, all of you, for staying with us for an hour and a half almost on a Monday night. Go well. Big thanks from me.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks a lot for your presence here. And I hope you will be nature coaching enthusiasts in your work with people. And send us your feedbacks about this session, but also about your experimentations with your clients. We are very curious and are also collecting data about experiences of other colleagues. So thank you if you will want to share anything with us.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Ciao.
Bye, everybody.
Nice evening. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.